Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Eric. Eric, welcome to the show. Thank you for making time today. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks for inviting me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, please, the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in the United States. In fact, we're in Virginia Beach on the East Coast. And my wife and I have 4 children. Our youngest 2 children are our biological children, and our oldest 2 children are our adopted children. And so we adopted internationally 2 years ago, and living life together as a family. I'm an entrepreneur, small business owner, and we just are doing life right now.
Yeah. Wow. Full on. You've
Yes.
got you and your wife have got your hands full with 4 kids, and you juggling the entrepreneurship gig as well. Yeah. Full on.
Yep.
Full on.
Yep.
International adoption. Like there's obviously different layers of complexity in different adoption stories, and the international adoption aspect seems to bring some more complexity. International adoption, interracial adoption. As a white guy adopted by white folks from a white first mother or birth mother or biological mother, whatever you want to call them, I didn't experience, any of that complexity. I had, I guess, my own stuff really. But could you give us a view of that, your story and what you've learned about that, and then we can get into kind of navigating the complexities.
Yeah, no, so I mean, that's a really good question to start off with, because honestly, when we made the decision to adopt, and we wrestled with the decision, are we going to adopt domestically or internationally? We just felt our adoption journey was shaping up to be an international adoption. And I said so many things as we were going through the preparing process that a lot of people say, which is, if I hear about all of these kids that need forever families, why is it so hard? Why is it so expensive? Why is it so, fill in the blank? This should be easier. And the more we went along the process, the more humbled I became by the process. And really now on this end, realize no, this should be a complex issue. There should be multiple checkpoints. There should be multiple people involved, and it should be expensive because you want the best people involved in the process. If not, you end up with a situation, some friends of ours adopted. They live in the United States, and they adopted from a non-Hague accredited country. And so there wasn't all the checks and balances. And it turned out, after their daughter had been with them for about a year, as she gained, English and understanding, her adoptive parents started noticing a pattern in things that she was saying. And they really dug in deep and found out she wasn't ever orphaned. There was no termination of parental rights. She was trafficked. There was a very evil guy who was an attorney that was going around to these, villages in Africa, claiming that the children would go to America for a year for school. And he had paperwork that he'd have these parents sign who couldn't read English, but the paperwork was all in English, lied to them about what it said, and it was a termination of parental rights. And so then he was able to take the child in the termination of parental rights and go to agencies that orchestrate adoptions, and the agencies had no idea. And so I can say with confidence, because of all of the hoops we had to go through in our adoption and all of the many different people involved, there's no way our children are trafficked. There's just way too many checks and balances. We spent too much time in our adopted children's birth town, working with their social workers, their psychiatrists, their psychologists, their therapists. Like, we met all of these people, their foster family. So we really got the whole story, because there's no way this many different people from this many different organizations could be in cahoots together. And so adoption is tricky, because here's the thing about it. What is adoption? Adoption is an imperfect solution trying to fix something that was once perfect that became broken. The perfect design for family isn't to include an orphan. But we live in a world where things are broken. And so now we're stepping in trying to fix this thing. And come on, nothing ever gets fixed as good as it once was. You know, if my kids break a vase or something, or a pot or something falls, this piece of ceramic falls and it's broken, a statue or something, like we can restore it to the best of our abilities, but it's never going to be back just the way it was. And that's what an adoption is. So it's going to be messy. It's going to be hard, but oh my gosh, it's so worth it. And it's so necessary.
Yeah. So as you say, the process is necessarily complex.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the kind of I guess the settling in, the complexity of the settling in period, given international and interracial adoptions, those added complexity, language, culture, attachment, it's all a little, it's all trickier.
Yes.
From the outside, it seems trickier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is why I love like resources like your podcast, where you're interviewing multiple different people, because here's the thing about every single adoption. There are principles behind the practices that are at play. And so it's good to understand the principles, but every practice, every experience, every journey is unique and different. And so please don't hear somebody else's adoption story and think that your potential adoption story is going to look like that. Or if you're listening to this and you have adopted or been adopted, don't project your experience as the universal experience that everybody's going to have. So with that is kind of a caveat to our adoption experience. Our adoption experience is unique, like everybody's. Our children, we are a mixed race family now. Our children are from Bulgaria. However, they're Roma, so they have beautiful brown skin, and they look nothing like the four of us that are the biological part of the family. And so when the six of us go out, people get confused. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I took my adopted son, who's 14, who's 14, with his buddy, his best friend, and who is an American, Caucasian boy. And I took the two of them to an amusement park for Halloween, this big, it's Halloween time as we're recording this. And so I took them to this thing with haunted houses and all this stuff. And it dawned on me as we were talking to a couple different people. I was sitting there thinking, like, everybody thinks that boy is my son, that because he's Caucasian, and they got to think this is his buddy, when in reality, the brown-skinned boy is my son. And it was just, you just become aware of that kind of stuff. And so there's that part of it, of the interracial. But that's not as big of a deal. And I know for some people it is. For us, that hasn't been as big of a deal. The culture blending, bringing in their culture, bringing their Bulgarian culture back with us, has been challenging. But the thing that made, and the other thing you mentioned, language. The thing I tell people all the time about language is our biological children didn't speak when we brought them home. So it was totally okay with us that our adopted children, who were 12 and 13 at the time, couldn't speak English. Our birth children couldn't speak English when we brought them home from the hospital. At least with our adopted children, they could point to things. And, we could communicate with, exaggerated body language and stuff like that. So
interesting perspective on it, Eric. I love that.
Yeah. So it's totally okay. And we got to learn together. We learned some Bulgarian, they learned, English. Now, we're all English. But yeah, but what made the unique thing for us is we left Bulgaria, landed in the United States, planned to just kind of, a lot of people call it cocooning. We plan to just cocoon in the home, in the house, just as a family of 6, for probably, 4 weeks is kind of what we had heard, just to help our adopted son and daughter calm, be in a routine, be familiar, for bonding. Well, the bonding was going so well that 2 weeks after being home, we went to visit family, which is about 10 hours from us. We stayed there for a week, and we got back home the moment, the week that everything shut down because of the pandemic. And so then we were quarantined for the next several weeks. So we kind of had this extreme cocooning as a family that was really forced upon us because of the quarantine. And actually, that really helped us a lot. We just spent day after day after day, playing games and bonding and things like that. And there's so many games that don't require English that our kids were able to learn right away. You may adopt children with cognitive disabilities that can't pick up on games like that. But again, that's where it comes down to, every experience is unique. So yeah.
And what have you learned in terms of overcoming those the challenges of the cultural nature, the challenges of the culture nature? What have you learned that you'd like to share with the listeners who are maybe going, navigating similar challenges?
Sure. Kids and preteens don't care about their culture. So we hear all this, like, oh, there's, like, yesterday was a Bulgarian holiday. And our son and daughter couldn't care less. And just like when they were in Bulgaria, they probably didn't care. So you kind of got to figure out, like, don't take a country as a culture. A country isn't a culture. And you can't even take a people group as a culture. You have to learn, how did your kids experience the culture that they were in? There are holidays in America that some families celebrate a whole lot more, with a lot more gusto than we do. I never growing up, my family never did Lent. I mean, that was the thing. We went to church every Sunday, and we were Christians, but our faith, it just didn't include a significant, I had heard about it, but it would be easy to look at the American culture and think that, this season of Lent is this massively important thing, when for our biological children, it never has been. So you got to take time to figure out, what did your children experience in the culture? What holidays was a big deal for them? Name day was very important to our adoptive children, so we now celebrate their name day. That was really significant to them. Easter is a big one. Bulgarian Easter and some of their Bulgarian traditions with Easter. We learned that is really important to them. They do, there's this whole thing with a red egg and egg fighting. They take hard-boiled eggs and smash them against each other and see which one doesn't break. So now on Easter, we've got smashed hard-boiled eggs all over the place. But then there are other holidays and very traditional Bulgarian stuff, Bulgarian dress, Bulgarian music, things like that our kids, they just don't care anything about it, because that wasn't part of their village. That wasn't part of their community. So get to know your kids, find out what they want to celebrate or what they have been celebrating. And then I would say, don't try to recreate it, because you're never going to be able to recreate it. If they have the cognitive ability to do so, help them be the leader of that. Help them speak into that. Now, I can say that because we adopted older children. I can't tell you what to do if you adopt a 1-year-old from Bulgaria. I have no clue. You would be better off finding some people that were adopted when they were 1 and asking them. Just like we're sure there are things down the road our kids are going to most likely be drawn to and want to reflect on, and questions they want to ask. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Mm-hmm. So so you got to figure out what's unique. Here's the thing. You're not adopting an orphan. You're adopting a child, a human being, and every human being is unique and has a unique temperament and personality and character. So don't ever look at them as the orphan. In my family, we talk a lot about the fact that our children are not, they were orphans, but they are no longer orphans. They are a forever son, a forever daughter. And so what label they once carried no longer defines them. And they're a survivor, and we're still walking through that. There's still impact of that. It would be naive to try to just act like nothing happened. Like, well, now you're in a family, so life is good. That's baloney. But just focus on your child as the uniqueness. I don't know if I can stress that enough.
Yeah. So it sounds to me that this is an exploration, an ongoing exploration. It's an ongoing conversation. It's actually about the exploration is you as the adopted parent exploring with your no longer orphans, with your kids, what's important to them, rather than trying to do some kind of, well, the only word that came into my head was culture stuffing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. But you can't force, we have biological children. We haven't stuffed culture into them. We haven't forced culture into it. Culture is just what they experience, And so what we've done is we've just added new experiences, and not to we don't celebrate name day for our biological children, but we do celebrate the name day for our adopted children. But we all then do Christmas and birthdays and, the things that we celebrate. And then we now have Dingler Day. So Dingler Day is the first day we live together as a family of 6. People always struggle, like, what's the family Genesis day? Was it the first day you met on trip 1? Was it when the judge signed the adoption decree? Was it when you got back to your birth home or to your home, your residence? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Just pick one. Yeah, just pick one. We made the decision along with our children that our Dingler Day, our family day, we did hear a lot of people call it Gotcha Day. We actually heard from individuals that had been adopted that they found that term uncomfortable. Because generally when you say gotcha, it's like a trick. You've played a trick on somebody. You pulled something off on them. And so some people weren't comfortable with that. So we just decided to go with Dingler Day. That's our last name.
Yeah.
And we decided for us, it was going to be the first day we lived together as a family of 6, because we took our children with us. Both times we went to Bulgaria, we took our bio children. Again, that was right for us. We have some people, we're in a couple Facebook groups. You know, I love Facebook groups. We're in a couple Facebook groups, and there are some people, somebody will come in and say, they'll ask, hey, we're about to go, we're planning our trip 1. That's for, so every country that it's different. Some countries you go for 1 trip, 2 trips, 3 trips, whatever. Bulgaria is a 2-trip country. So we went over in September for a week and spent a week with our adopted children. And then we had to come back to the States and wait for the legal maneuvering to go, all the legal stuff to happen. Our son and daughter were older, so they had to go to the Capitol to a judge, and was interviewed by a judge, and had the judge asked them, do you want to be adopted by Eric and Marissa? And do you want to move to the United States as their son and daughter? And they were able to say yes or no to that. So we had to wait for all that to play out. And then about 3 months later, we went back to Bulgaria for 10 days. Well, we took our biological children both times. One, we were blessed financially to be able to do that, even though it wasn't really that much more expensive. And we were adopting 2 older children. And honestly, I believe we are where we are because we took our biological children. Like, you know, they were 8 and 10 at the time. And they were 7 and 9. I'm sorry. They were 7 and 9 at the time. And we went to the park day after day after day with a soccer ball. And thank goodness we had our younger children who had the energy and the physical ability to keep up with the children we were adopting. And we just played soccer. And when my wife and I needed to step back and take a break, they could just keep playing soccer. And it just drew our birth children were amazing. They just drew, because kids are kids. I mean, they just play. They didn't require language. You know, play is a universal language. And so they just played. It was just this beautiful thing that happened every single day, day after day. And they are everybody just felt better, I think, at night going to bed in this strange apartment in the middle of the, you know, Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. So it was beautiful and perfect for us. But some people ask in the Facebook, should I take my biological children? No, never take your This is a time for you to focus on. Like, it was, you know, we had to focus on the children we were adopting and bond with them and da-da-da. And I can't stand that approach from people that have adopted, because that's projecting your experience. We wrestled as a family. My wife and I wrestled with what's best for us. And if we had been adopting children that required a feeding tube and had all of these medical things that we had no experience with, we probably wouldn't have taken our bio children, because we would have had so much to learn and would had to have got through. Or maybe if we were adopting much younger children, maybe we wouldn't have. I don't know. No. But because of the 2 individuals we were adopting, and we didn't make the decision to take our birth children until we were paired, until we were matched with the children we were adopting and had their files and read through their files. And then at that time, we kind of made the decision, like, yeah, we're gonna take our birth children with us.
Yeah. So it feels to me like it's a bit like what we had this discussion when we met a few weeks ago about what we're going to talk about today. And you said, well, I think you said something like, well, let's just keep it natural, keep it organic. And, you know, you mentioned at the top that, you know, at the start, you felt that, you know, it seemed to be kind of, it seemed to be, it was kind of like a gut feel or an intuition for you that international adoption was the way to go. And you have been kind of feeling your way through this process organically, in the moment, feeling what's right. And And that's kind of that's my perception of how you've navigated your journey and will continue to navigate. Right? Is that fair? Does that feel like an accurate representation?
Yeah, that's very, very fair. Now, to be completely transparent with you, and I share this not out of shame or being embarrassed or anything like that, but I share this only out of a sense of reluctancy, because I have enough experience that when people hear this, they immediately change their opinion or they start to tune me out. So I don't want people to tune me out, or anything like that, because I don't think this is a prerequisite for adoption. But as it happens, my wife and I we have a Christian faith, and so we believe in Jesus Christ, and we spent a lot of time praying about this, and we felt like God was leading us to that. Now, if a person's listening and they don't have a faith and they hear God is leading me, they start to go, "Ooh, this guy's a weirdo." And it's nothing like that. It's just, this is who we are. We have a faith. We believe that God does lead us. And I'm going to follow the directions of the guy that predicted he was going to die, but come back from the dead. And there are 400 witnesses that saw this happen. That's a pretty cool parlor trick, if you ask my opinion. So I'm going to follow that guy. And so we follow our Christian faith and belief with it. But adoption isn't a Christian experience. Now, the scripture is very clear. Every Christian has a role to play in caring for the vulnerable, for the widow, the orphan, the imprisoned, the homeless. But does that mean every Christian should adopt? Absolutely not. But you have a role to play, whether that's, supporting agencies and other families. We tell people, if somebody in your church is adopting, or in your community is adopting, offer to throw a baby shower, for them, find out what they need. Or, we had people that got us bikes because we were bringing 2 more teenagers, preteens into our house, and we were going to need, bikes and beds, and, there's a lot of expense with adoption. So we had some people said, "Hey, listen, we've got these 2 bikes. Would you like them for, your new son and daughter?" That was unbelievably helpful at the time. So we all have something we can do. So I believe if you're a Christian, you have a responsibility. If you're going to say you're a follower of Jesus and you're not willing to help respond to others in need, I don't know if you're really a follower of Jesus. If you're going to be a follower of Christ, you have to be involved in the response, prayer, so whatever it is, time. You can share of your time, talent, treasure, and table, in some way to respond to this. If you're not a Christian, it's just a good thing to do, and you just need to be a good person to people in need. And not everybody's called to adopt, but we can all support people that are we support people that choose to have a biological children. So why wouldn't we support people the same way that are choosing to adopt? So that's kind of where we come from. But yeah, it is seat of our pants a lot of time. My wife and I, we did a lot of things. We from night 1 on our pickup trip. So on Dingler Day, the first day we lived together as a family of 6, which was crazy. On trip 1, we had an interpreter with us all day, every day. This guy was great, and a younger guy, and could play soccer with the kids, and just, he was just a great guy. Absolutely fantastic. He's with the organization in Bulgaria, FNA, that we worked with. Michael, our kids still talk about Michael, 2 years later. This guy is a very important person in our family. And so then on the second trip, he met us at the apartment in Bulgaria, rode with us. I'm sorry, in Sofia, rode with us and we rented a van, rode with us on the van, picked up Martin and Stoyanka in their home city, drove back with us into the city, and we got out of the van, and he went, okay, you've got my number if you need me, I'll see you in 2 days. And he turned around and walked away. And there we are standing in this, pedestrian street with these two children. And I went back in time, about 9 years, to when I turned the car on, and I looked in my rear view mirror, and there sits my wife and our newborn daughter in her car seat. And we're in the parking garage at the hospital. And I'm sitting there thinking, these people are letting us take this child home. Like, they do not know me well enough for this. And suddenly I became very aware of every vehicle on the highway. I had never been so aware of every car on the highway, and people were driving way too fast. But, fast forward, here I am, this guy's like, okay, here's these two children. He turns and walks away. And I'm like, oh, crap, now what? So it's just this amazing experience. But from that night, my wife and I kept a journal for months. And every night after we put the kids to bed, and we established a routine on the very first night that we follow. 2 years later, Marissa takes the girls and puts them to bed and talks with them for a moment and prays with them. I take the boys. I go to their room. We talk for a couple of minutes, goof around, just joke around. I pray over them. And then my wife and I, we go to, our room. And so from that night for months, we kept a journal, and we would sit there and we'd be like, okay, what did we see today? What behaviors did we see? What problems did we see? What did we have to overcome? And we started looking for patterns. And all 4 kids, we drew, a line down the middle of the page and across the center, and each kid got a block. And we just made notes about them. And then every behavior, we asked ourselves, okay, is that an adoption related behavior? Or is that they're a human being related behavior? Like what was that? And we were looking for issues of like food, over sexuality, withdrawal, aggressiveness, grooming, manipulation, like fear, just like anything you could think of, probably more so on the negative than the positive. We did write down the positives because we wanted to celebrate those the next day, but we just looked for patterns to emerge. And don't just look, if you have biological children, you need to look for how their behavior changes. And is their behavior changing because children's behaviors change, day by day, or was it an adoption related behavior? And that journal proved very valuable to us. And that conversation each night, some nights it took us, 3 minutes. Did you see anything today? No. Did you? No, I don't think so. What did we do today? And then no, that was it. Like, we saw nothing today that stood out. And then other days we would talk for an hour and a half, about things. So just being intentional to process the experience. Don't just, you just can't come home and go, okay, we're home now, and try to get into what your life was like the day before you brought the kids home.
I love that. I asked you whether it was an intuition thing, how you've you're going with the flow. You've talked, then you brought it to your religion, and in a nutshell, faith has guided you, I would say, and I hope this,
sure. Absolutely,
faith has guided you along the journey, continues to guide you along the journey. And I was about to go into, so it's about. I said it's intuition. You said it was faith. What it isn't about is processes and how-tos. And like you mentioned, being an entrepreneur. In the entrepreneurial world, we're obsessed with how do we do this?
Yeah.
How do I do that? And I see that a lot in parenting as well. How do I do this? How do I do that? And like, we are really, because we are all in the Western world, we're all kind of brought up on. We're educated in processes, aren't we? So life is seen like a science experiment. So you have a list of equipment, and you have your method process, and you put this with this and you get this. And that's how we're learned. You know, there's a process for doing math, or maths as we call it. We have an extra S on the end of it compared to you guys. You know, you take this and this, and life is reduced to a process, and we
and it can be scored too. And there's always an outcome. There's always an outcome that can be scored and measured.
And I'm really not a fan of those how-to things, because I've tried a lot of them and they don't work. But then you come up with a barnstorming idea for me, which really you've got a self-reflection tool. And, you know, I'm thinking of this like, well, this is like it's kind of like you're like you're self-coaching, aren't you, in a way? So for me, life changes about perspective. When our perspective changes, our world changes in a massive
that's good, yeah.
Notification. But most of the time, we can't see the wood for the trees. It's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. Is another way that I see this. What you've given yourself with this strategy, tactic, whatever, journaling, or you know, whatever or what you've done is you've given yourself perspective. You're allowing you're stepping back from the trees to see the wood, and then you're going forward. You're going from the wood. You're looking for the patterns, and then you're thinking, well, I need to address the patterns. Seems to me like that's what you're doing, and I'm labeling it because I think it's really good for the listeners to try that idea on. Yeah,
right. Well, and what we were doing is, we were taking the emotion out of it, because here's the thing: this is a very emotional experience. We're emotional beings, and we're created to experience and feel emotion, stuff like that. And it's exhausting and it's hard. And I've done a lot of hard things. I've planted a church, and I've started businesses, and you know, had biological children, and an adoption, and all of it's hard in different ways. But the difference between running my business and leading my family is the emotion that's involved. Like, everybody is emotional, and emotions cloud things. And it was amazing at the end of the week to look back past the last 7 days and read through what we wrote once we were removed from the emotion. I mean, we have, and this isn't the proper venue, and I don't want to get into any details, because they're not my stories to tell, they're my children's stories to tell. But we are still living through significant behavioral challenges and things like that. Like, but you know, we deal with behavioral challenges with our biological children. So anyway, it can be very emotionally draining, and there are days you are going to go, oh my, hey, I'll tell you, I'll just be very transparent and honest. When we were in the hospital with our birth children, Simon, they made us watch these videos on shaken baby syndrome. And you were required to do this training and this education before you took your child home. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is ridiculous. Like, why would anybody want to shake their baby? Like, why are we required to watch this? This is dumb. And then you get home, and you've been home for about 3 weeks, and you haven't had more than a couple hours of sleep. This little baby is wailing their head off. You've tried everything you can. You're emotionally exhausted. You're mentally worn out. Your relationship with your spouse is there's tension there, because you haven't had time for the two of you, and there's all this stuff. Like, there are times you have to lay the baby down and just step back and get a grip, because if not, you could go, why won't you stop crying? Like, and then I was like, oh my gosh, now I see where people can get to that point. Well, there are times my wife and I have to step away and look at each other and go, are you kidding me? Like, how many times are we going to have to go through this behavior with this child? Like, why won't they just get this? And we have to have a safe community that we can go to and go, oh, and then get back into the game. So that journaling helped us with that. It was our therapist. Every night we were just dumping onto our therapist, which was a pad of paper. So yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that I loved what you said, and I thought, well, it's the emotion in the moment that stops us seeing the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
Sorry, the cloud. Sorry, I wrote down cloud. It's the cloud that stops us seeing the wood for the trees.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm a metaphor guy. I'm a metaphor guy.
That's good.
Because we're talking. Otherwise, we're talking about abstract concepts.
Yeah.
And to see the invisible man, we have to put the bandages on his face.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
So you've talked about the behavioral challenges and how the diary as your therapist has helped you losing your mind. So those are my words.
Accurate words. Accurate words.
What else would you like to share? Given, I mean, I love what you said. Back at the start of the conversation, as you said, like, I think you said something like, every adoption is unique, and there are principles.
Yes, the principle behind the practice. Yeah,
the principle behind the practice. So, what principles would you like to share to help other parents who may be going through these behavioral challenges?
Sure. Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, so this whole idea of the principle behind the practice, this is a core value of our business. And so it's something I bring into my everyday life because I am regularly talking about it with our team. But just like with our journaling, the practice is the journaling. The principle is we needed a way to express and record what was happening so we could come back to it distant from the emotion, clear of the cloud, let the cloud clear so we could see clearly. The practice for us was journaling. For someone else, it may be therapy. You may need a therapist that you go to every week and reflect on this, and that's okay. Healthy people are the ones who have gotten help when they've needed it. I don't have a headache today because I took Advil. So healthy people are the ones that got the help. So don't think that therapy is bad. My wife and I, we have enough training and experience from, my wife has a degree in psychology. I ran a summer camp for 15 years and been through immense amount of training with that. So we just felt comfortable with our practice. But the principle is we had to get it out somewhere. So I think that's a principle you need. For behavior, you have to step back and remember that there's a reason behind the reason. So when it comes to behavior, there's a reason behind the reason. With our children, with all of us, there are three main reasons you've done everything you've ever done. And those are, you thought the thing would make you significant, accepted, or secure. Now, this is a biblical explanation. We see this in the book of Genesis. Adam and Eve were very significant in all of God's creation. They were the most significant in all of God's creation. They were immediately accepted. Adam didn't have to use any cheesy pickup lines with Eve to get him to like her. And they had security. They walked around naked. You're pretty secure. Like there was no concern. They had no worries whatsoever. But then when they chose sin, they lost those three things. And ever since then, we have been chasing them as humankind. Those are the three reasons you want to ever do anything. If you don't have the Christian faith, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the same exact thing. It's just psychology catching up with the Bible. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, before you can get to self-actualization or anything like that, it's, you've got your security, you've got acceptance, significant, it's all in there. So with behavior, you got to step back and you got to go, okay, Why did they just behave that way? Did they think that would make them significant, accepted, or secure in this moment? What's the reason? Because I need to address the reason, not the behavior. The behavior is an expression of a need that a person has. And that's okay. And so all behavior is explainable. Now, if you have a child or a person with cognitive impairments, you would have to add the layer of unaware. But even then, my wife used to do in-home play therapy with children on the autism spectrum. And she had a young boy that she would work with that she had to be very careful around because he was a biter. He would bite. But even then, he would bite because he would be in a situation where he was getting frustrated. And when you're frustrated, you don't feel secure. And so his way to gain control over it, to express this isn't a good thing, is he would bite. So even with cognitive impairment, there's still this human drive for significance, acceptance, and security. And I think it plays out in almost every human being. I'm sure there are probably some exceptions. I've not found them, but I'm sure there probably are. But 99.9% of the time, significant acceptance and security. So with behavior, you just got to step back, and then you have to help the person go, okay, you're behaving. One of our children, one of our adopted children, has a really difficult time with the truth. Gut reaction is always to lie. I mean, for a while, everything was a lie. Well, it makes sense. When you step back and you think about and you imagine yourself in their journey, where the people that are supposed to be there decided not to be there, then you were taking from everything else, and you lost control over everything, and then you were in a situation where you just had to survive. You create your reality. You were able to you get to the point where you believe you can speak into existence, a better future, a significance, an acceptance, a security. And if you're afraid you just did something wrong and the truth is going to lead you to trouble, you're going to lie. That's human nature. So we've had to just work daily to say to all of our kids, we can get to anything as long as we're honest. If I brought any of our 4 children in here and I said, I have a question, do I love you? They would all say yes. And if I asked them, why do I love you? All 4 of our kids would say, and they would probably roll their eyes when they say it, but they would go, because of who we are and not the things that we do. Yeah, absolutely. And I want you to know it so well that when you say it, you roll your eyes, because I love you because of who you are, not things. And then I go, that's right. And who are you? And they'll say, I'm your son. I'm your daughter. That's right. That's why I love you, not because of the words you say. So you can lie to me. You can tell me the truth. I cannot love you any more or any less. I love you because of who you are. And that will never change. So with behavior, you got to wrestle with, what are they trying to get? What's the core need not being met? How can I reinforce that elsewhere? And you just got to start from the beginning a lot of times. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff our biological children just picked up on because we responded every time they cried. We walked in, every time they cried, we fed them. We changed their clothing. We kept them, clean and dry and safe and fed. Well, you don't do that with a 12 and 13-year-old. So you have to look for opportunities to respond, even when they're not asking you to respond. You have to preemptively take care of things. You have to preemptively make sure, look, here's a basket of food. You never have to ask to eat from this. You can eat from this anytime you want. You never have to ask. It's always here for you. What are your favorite? Take them to the grocery store. Like we were in Bulgaria. We took our children the first day to the grocery store. And it was the first time, obviously, that our adopted son and daughter got to choose food. And they pointed to stuff very timidly, but we slowly got them to point to things they liked. And we were in this one aisle, and my son points to this thing, and I'm like, "Oh, you like this?" And he said, "Yeah." And he pointed to that and the eggs. And I said, "Okay." And I'm thinking, well, this must be breakfast, and this is a sausage, some type of sausage with this. So we take it home. The next day, we get it out, and I cut this sausage open. Mind you, it's all in Cyrillic alphabet in Bulgarian. We can't read any of it. Google Translate is no good. I cut into this sausage only to discover that it's a cheese. But it looked like here was a smoked cheese, and I thought it was a smoked sausage. And so there's just all these fun things. But when we got home, we looked for smoked cheese and found some smoked Gouda and stuff like that, because that's at the time what he pointed to that he liked. And so you just have to preemptively get in there and figure out, what can I do to help with that significance, acceptance, and security? And then just keep in mind that we just talk like, and maybe it's different because it's so obvious because we don't look alike. But we just talk regularly about the fact that our children are adopted. Like, it's not a secret. Bad things grow in the dark. So we talk about it, and we reinforce the fact that you're in a forever family, like we all chose to come together. We made the decision, like we decided to come together as a family. We can get through anything as long as we're honest. I love you because of who you are and not the things you do. There's just all these things. My wife and I, we have 7 letters to our last name. So we came up with 7 core values, and each core value starts with the letter of our last name, and they hang by our dining room table. And we refer to these core values often. And so our kids, the first letter in our last name is D. And D stands for we dwell on the positives, but we address the negatives. So we don't live we don't come back to, if you mess up today, we're going to address that behavior, but I'm not going to bring it back up later. Like, if you lied to me today, I'm not talking to you about, you also lied yesterday and last week you lied, and I'm not bringing that back up. We're talking about today's behavior. And there's a consequence for today's behavior that may carry out over, one of our children hasn't had an iPad since last December, and it's November. But you don't have the right to an iPad. That's a privilege you earn. And the trust isn't there yet. Our other 3 have iPads. One of our children doesn't, because we don't try, and we just but they know why. They know they don't have it because we don't trust them yet. And we do this thing where we have a meter, and every time you tell the truth, you get a line in the meter, but one lie erases it all. And we start over. One lie erases it all. And we start over. That's how trust is built. Trust is built over time, but it's lost in an instant. And so it's just a matter of having these things that you identify, that you repeat. What gets repeated gets remembered. And so we repeat these things over and over. We are made in God's image, and God spoke the world into existence. He opened his mouth and the world was created. So because of that, we have the ability to speak life or death. Now, I'm not as good as God, so I can't actually speak something. I can't say, I want a refill on my coffee, and my coffee cup refills. But I can look at another human being and I can say, you are wonderfully made. You are loved and will always be loved. And I can speak life into them, or I can look at them and go, you're such an idiot. You never learn. Why can't you get, you just lie every day. All you're capable of is being a liar. You're stupid. And now I'm speaking death into that person. So I think the principle is you have to speak life into your children. Well, what does that look like for us? The practice is 7 core values that we repeat over and over and over and over. That's our practice. I don't know what the practice would look like for your family. Don't try to come up with core values just because we did that match the letters of your last name, especially if your last name is like Zelowolinsky or something like that. That could be drastically horrible. But just spend time I tell you, my wife and I, when we first got married, we spent, probably, let's see. It was when we found out we were pregnant. It's when we found out we were pregnant. We probably spent 4 months going out on dates. We still date as a married couple. It's a lot harder now with the kids. But we spent about 4 months on dates working on our family by creating our core values. And that's what we did on date night. We go to a restaurant and we'd sit there for hours just talking about, dreaming about our family. And it comes back to leadership. It comes back to entrepreneurship. What do we do as a business owner? You start with the end in mind and you work backwards, from there. James Covey, very famous, start with the end in mind. Well, we did that with our family. We said, okay, we're pregnant with this little one. What do we want our family to look like when they're 25? Well, we want them to want to come to our house for holidays. Well, how do you do that? How do you create a house where your children want to come back to it when they're adults? Well, you do that from the first day you bring them home from the hospital. And so you got to start with the end in mind. And I did create, and I've done this with all of my kids. I've written my kids letters for future events in their life. I wrote a letter to all of our children, to all 4 of our children, for their wedding day. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I've written them a letter and I have a file and I keep them, and they're called my no duh letters. And the idea behind it is I want to hand them this letter on their wedding day and I want them to read it. And I want, and in there I say, this today, I hope you are experiencing this. And I hope this person you're marrying is this. And I hope, here's my hopes and dreams. And I want them to read that and go, well, no duh, Dad. Like you've told me this every day, my entire life. I don't understand why you wrote this down. Well, I needed the end picture. I needed to know what I was working towards. So I wrote that. When I was pastoring the church, I no longer pastor the church on a day-to-day basis. But when I was pastoring the church and we would do baby dedications, part of our baby dedication was we required the mom and dad to write a letter to their child for their 18th birthday about the kind of person they hope they are. And we had them read this letter to the church and say, this is the commitment you're making. Now you have a picture in mind. What do you need to do to get there? And it's not going to be perfect. You're going to mess up. I had to apologize. I had to apologize to my son last night. I completely misread a situation and I got on him for it. And I used my family voice, that voice that I use, that I would be embarrassed if you ever heard me, Simon, use this tone of voice with my children. We all have it. I have it. I'm far from perfect. And I bawled him out on something. And I went out of the room and my wife came up to me and she goes, I love you, but you were wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean I was wrong? And then she told me the whole story and I had to go in and say, hey, son, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I am so sorry. Will you please forgive me? And we have to do that as parents. So I'm kind of off on a tangent. I apologize, but yeah, I wasn't expecting the question. Good question. So I guess how would I wrap this up? How would I bring all this idea home? The principle behind the practice of behaviors. Start with the end in mind. Don't address the behavior, but don't parent the behavior. Like you can't have your kid lying. How are they going to have a successful marriage and a job if they're a liar? Like you can't allow that. And I have so many people in like the adoption group will go like, oh yeah, well, we just try to make sure we don't ask questions that they're going to have the ability to lie to. Okay, but their boss isn't going to do that. Their spouse isn't going to do. Like, how are you setting them up for success by avoiding it? Like, no, I ask this child questions to see if they lie. Like, I know the answer. And some people, well, I would never ask the question if I know the answer. Oh, no, I'm asking the question because I'm testing, I'm parenting, I'm teaching, I'm training. So start with the end in mind, know what you're working with, address behavior, but parent the heart. You got to fight for the heart of your children. So address the behavior, but parent the heart, man. Go after the heart. Let them know you love them never miss a day. Never miss a day telling your children you love them because of who they are and not the things they do. And so fight for that. Have some core values, have some principles that guide you. It doesn't matter what. Our family never eats meat. That's great. If you want to raise children that are vegans, make that a core value. That's okay. But just know what your core values are.
Wow. So there's so much there. I was thinking this is going to be a conversation purely on the international and interracial adoption piece. We've talked a little bit about international, tiny little bit about interracial, and then we've gone into stuff that is far more applicable to everybody that's listening. So what would you like to call this episode?
Eric's ramblings.
I think, look, we're in business here, right?
Yeah.
We need something that sells.
Yeah, it's the principles behind the practice. I don't know if that sells or not, but that's really what. Because here's the thing: when we are faced with racial issues, we are working with the heart. Like, if something happens and somebody calls one of our kids out or does something, or people say dumb things to us in public, and we address them. We talk about them with our kids. They know they're brown. They know we're white. Like, it's a thing. So we talk about it. I have to teach my brown son different behaviors than my white son. That's called white privilege, and it exists. My white son can walk home from a friend's house and cut through a neighbor's yard, and we don't have to worry about it. My brown son walks home from a neighbor's house or from a friend's house and cuts through a neighbor's yard. Somebody's going to call the cops on him. That's white privilege. So we just have to talk about that. We have to deal with that. But what really matters at the end of the day isn't the color of my skin or my children's skin. What matters at the end of the day is they know that I love them because of who they are and not the things they do and what they look like. But who are they? They're my son. He's my son. Brown, white, black. He's my son. He will always be my son. And so those things happen. And these kids are going to say crazy. Understandably, one day I asked my daughter, I said something, I'm like, why do you think that was okay? And she just looked at me and she goes, you're my fourth dad. Okay, you're right. I can't argue with that. I am your fourth dad. And I told her, I said, you're right, honey. I am your fourth dad. And here's the problem, though. I had no idea how to be a fourth dad. You see, my dad was my only dad. He was my forever dad. I have been Riley, our biological daughter. I have been her forever dad, and I've been my biological son. I've been his forever dad. So all I know how to be is a forever dad. So I'm sorry, I can't be your fourth dad because I don't know how to do that. But I know how to be a forever dad. So can I just be your forever dad? It's never come up. She's never brought it up again. That's not fair. That's not my choice. No, like, I understand why you say that, but I don't know how to live that way. This is how I know to live. Will you accept me for what I know how to do? Which all I know how to do, honey, is be a forever dad. Will you accept me for that? And I'll accept you for who you are. Who you are now is you're my daughter. So it's just that kind of stuff. So I think really the principles, it's the core values that drive you, that determines how you respond to racial issues, cultural issues. It's like in business. You and I are both business guys. Culture trumps vision. Like, you can give your company the best vision in the world, we're going to be the best at customer service. But if your culture is to never respond to customers until you feel like it, well, you're not the best at customer service. So your culture trumps your vision. So as a family, what creates culture is language. Language impacts culture like nothing else. So you have to know the language you speak as a family. So wrestle with that, predetermine the language, get ready for that. And that's from your core values. Then you're ready to respond to racial issues, adoption related issues. You're going to have language. So when you're going to be out in public and somebody's going to look at you and they're going to say, oh, they are so lucky to have you as their parents. Lucky? Are you kidding me? Like, my kids are not lucky. The things that happen to them. And I just tell people the same thing I tell my children. Oh, when somebody says that to me, well, they're very lucky to have you as their parents. I say, well, actually, while I love them very much, I wish we would have never met. And I've told we talk about this. I love my children. I love them deeply. I wish and pray to God we never would have had to meet, because that means they would still be with their birth parents, which is the perfect situation. But that wasn't a possibility. So now I have the honor and the privilege and the responsibility to step into that role as forever mom and dad. Or my wife and I have that. So, but you have to know ahead of time what drives you and that language, because then you can respond when people say misinformed, inappropriate, unintelligent things. You can respond appropriately because you've predetermined your values.
Fantastic. Loved it, Eric. Real pleasure chatting.
Thank you. Thanks. And I just want to say that this all has driven my wife and I to create our nonprofit called Achieve Adoption. So Achieve Adoption is our nonprofit. We come alongside families that are adopting and help them with the cost of their international adoption by running fundraisers. So we take every $500 we earn, we turn it into $5,000, and all of that goes to the family. And we do all of the work to organize and lead the fundraiser. So that's one thing that Achieve Adoption does. And then the other thing we do is Achieve Adoption. We have a mission to go into other countries and help equip the people in those cultures, and to educate and equip individuals, adults, and different cultures to adopt their own orphans. It would have been ultimately, it would have been best for our adopted son and daughter to have been able to stay forever with their birth parents. But since that wasn't an option, the next best option would have been for them to be adopted within their culture, because we wouldn't be dealing with all the culture stuff and the racial stuff and things like that. But because of where they're from, that was not an option. There are legal issues, there are financial issues, there's religious pushback, there's cultural issues, there's all these reasons why that wasn't an option for them. So what we want to do is Achieve Adoption is we want to go into these communities and we want to equip and encourage and support raising up local people to respond to the orphans in their backyard. That already happens so much in America. That's why we decided that we were going to adopt internationally and not domestically. And so that was kind of the deciding factor for us. And after the adoption experience, we were so impacted by it, we decided to leave the church we had planted. We installed a new senior pastor so we could start a nonprofit, but we knew that we couldn't live off of a nonprofit. And we didn't want to raise donors to financially support our family. So we took my side business that of web design and created a digital marketing agency. So In Transit Studios is my company. I run my company so my family and I have income to live off of, and then we donate the profits from our company to our nonprofit, and then we have donors that come alongside us and support Achieve Adoption financially, and then we walk alongside families that are adopting and are gearing up to start doing the work in other countries to help build up locals in that area to adopt. So that's kind of our whole story and where we are. And if people want to know more about it, they can go to achieveadoption.org. And another way to support us, if you're in the market and need a digital marketing agency, intransitstudios.com. So
great. So there's going to be links. I'm just writing that down. Intransitstudios.com. There are going to be links in the show notes to the websites that Eric's mentioned and his social channels as well. So
appreciate
thanks
that.
again, Eric. You've been
thank you.
An absolute star. It's been a great pleasure and a real eye opener. I love your perspective. I've heard some perspectives from you today, my friend, that I've never heard before. It's been a real eye opener for me.
Well, thank you. And thank you for what you're doing for the adoption community. Resources like this that bring different voices to the table. Everything I shared today it's not original. It's adjustments to things I've heard and I've learned. And we're just constantly learning and adjusting. And I was able to learn those things because of the work that of people like you that you do. So thank you for putting this resource together for the adoption community, Simon.
Thank you. You're very welcome. And thank you, listeners. And we will speak to you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.